What's going on? Welcome to this ride-along video. Today I actually want to talk to you about the differences between the STI and the CVT. And I know this is not a straight-up comparison. They're very, very different cars. But the reason why I want to talk to you about them is because I've actually owned both. So I owned the 2017 WRX with a CVT for 3 years. Now I own the 2020 STI. This is a very subjective video, so you may not agree with my assessment of one thing or another. And if you don't, let me know in the comment section why not. So let me get right to it. First thing I'm going to talk about, transmission. Obviously, the biggest difference between the two cars is the transmission. The STI has a closed ratio 6-speed manual transmission, whereas the CVT, well, it's a CVT, it's a continuously variable transmission. And that transmission alone is a huge point of contention for a lot of people. People who don't own a WRX with a CVT already will have a very hard time justifying buying a WRX with a continuously variable transmission versus the 6-speed manual or the STI. And those of us who have owned the CVT, well, we quite enjoyed it. But that said, transmissions are night and day. The transmission in the STI is a robust, tried and true transmission that you will not have an issue with. Whereas the one in the CVT, it's a transmission that for all intents and purposes has 3 components. And I'm talking about the high torque chain and the variators. Any of those things goes, you pretty much have to replace the entire transmission. And even situations where you have leaks, you have to replace the whole transmission, and it sucks because you have to get that done through the dealer. Now, I'm not saying that there's even a huge number of those CVTs that fail. I don't know what the numbers are, and of course a lot of people are going to tell you when they're unhappy or when they have to replace the transmission versus those people who are happy with what they have. There's a lot of people now that are crossing into the 100,000 mile mark and over, and there's a lot of people also that they claim that they drive the car conservatively and their transmissions go even at stock power. That's all I'm going to say about that. Very different transmissions. This win is going to go definitely to the STI. Next thing I want to talk about is the engine. So FA20 engine versus the EJ engine, the ancient engine that is inside the STIs. The engine in the STI is old, it's inefficient. It's a powerful engine and you can mod the crap out of it, but you have to protect it, and it is very inefficient. The engine in the CVT is an FA20 engine. It's a direct injection engine. It has twin scroll turbo. It has equal length headers, which is an inefficient part of the design that a lot of us love. Nonetheless, it's very inefficient part of the design of the EJ engine. So it has equal length headers. It's a more modern engine, and when I had my CVT, I was consistently getting mid to high 20s just daily driving the car based on the way that I drove it. In the STI, I'm getting 18 to 20 based on the way that I drive. And partly is because it's just such a fun car to drive. When you're getting on, the ramps, you just punch it and it's fun. And, you tend to burn a lot of gas doing that. So that adds to it, but that's not to say that the engine would otherwise be efficient. It is not. It gets terrible fuel economy, and we all know it. If you buy the car, you're not buying it for the fuel economy. But there's something to be said about that. So because the EJ engine is so old and the FA20 engine is newer, I'm gonna give that easy win to the CVT. If this were 2021 and this car had the FA 2.4 engine that it promises to have, that's in the Ascent now, then in that case, that would probably be a very easy win for the STI. But for now, we'll give that win to the CVT. Next category I want to talk to you about is the ability to mod. If you're getting the car to mod it, the STI versus the CVT, this is a very, very easy win for the STI. You can find way more options, way more parts, way more things, whereas the CVT, well, a lot of the parts that you can get for it are newer. I even saw unequal length headers for the CVT. I don't know who the hell would get that, would buy that, but they offer unequal length headers for the CVT so that you can get, I guess the Subi Rumble out of them. That's crazy. Point is, they're starting to make more and more parts for the car, but the EJ engine is still miles ahead of it. So in ability to mod, that's an easy win for the STI. Another important thing about modding the CVT, well, the CVT can't handle that much power, especially compared to the STI. The STI can handle a lot more power than the CVT can, and because of that, you're gonna have more parts for it. You're gonna be able to do more modding to it. Once you hit that 300 horsepower line, then you're starting to get into the danger territory. You might even get there, depending on how you drive it, well before you get to that 300 line with a CVT. I'm not saying that the STI doesn't come with its risks. It does. However, it could definitely handle way more power than the CVT can before things start going south. Next thing I want to talk about is comfort and daily driver potential. Using the car as a daily driver. I used the CVT as a daily driver for 3 years, and now I've been using the STI as a daily driver. And in this category, the CVT definitely has a win for several reasons. The CVT is a continuously variable transmission, so you're not gonna feel any jerkiness from the transmission unless you want to. The ride is super smooth, and that's just something that even a perfect driver cannot replicate with a manual transmission. The CVT reigns supreme in the smoothness category. It's just a very linear and smooth acceleration. The CVT has 18-inch rims, the STI has 19-inch rims, and that means that, you know, potholes, and the regular CVT is going to be able to handle those a little bit more gracefully than the STI. Not by much, they still both suck, but the STI is a little bit worse. When it comes to road noise, both cars are very similar. I mean, they are the exact same car, basically, exact same body. However, other parts of the design actually affect how quiet the car is, even if it has the same soundproofing materials as each other. So the CVT is slightly quieter, very slightly quieter, only because it has less aggressive tires, less aggressive suspension. You also have that STI rumble that is not present in the CVT. It's just a quieter car altogether. That said, they both absolutely suck when it comes to road noise. It's something that has to be rectified if you really want to enjoy the car. And when it comes to the stereo, they both have the same stereo or can have the same upgraded stereo, and they both suck, so that's a tie in terms of the stereo. Generally speaking, the automatic CVT is just going to be a much better car as a daily driver. When you're sitting in traffic, it's much easier to just sit there and not have to worry about, you know, clutch in, clutch out, clutch in, clutch out. That's something that gets old very quickly. And since you don't have to deal with it with a CVT, well, the CVT gets an easy win here. The next thing I want to talk about, handling. So STI, easy win in handling. The STI has an adjustable center differential. That alone gives it a win. That's going to allow you to bias the torque distribution of the car between the front wheels and the rear wheels. And you can use that to any number of effects. You can use it to get out of snow. You could use it to drive the car more aggressively when the weather is good, or you can use it to have better handling in tricky situations where it might be raining or snowing or whatever the case might be. But that's not the only thing. The STI also has hydraulic steering, which, having driven both cars now for quite some time, I much prefer the hydraulic steering, and I have forgotten how it felt. But when I got back into this, now that I'm used to it, there's a connection there between the driver and the road that you just don't get with the electronic steering that's present in the CVT. And not to mention the fact that the STI has 19-inch rims, and it has a performance track tuned suspension that's stiffer, so it's sportier, so it's just a better handling suspension all around. So the win goes to the STI in the handling department. Let's switch gears real quick and talk about safety. Safety, easy win for the CVT, and the only reason why is because the CVT has eyesight. It comes standard with eyesight now. Now, say what you say about eyesight, there are situations in which eyesight is just gonna be a lifesaver. You know, a deer runs out in front of you and you just don't react fast enough, then that pre-collision braking can actually stop the car before you hit it, save yourself that headache. Even another car in front of you, lane keep assist, same thing, it'll prevent you from leaving your lane. There's a lot more eyesight features. I'm not going to go over them. I already made a video, so please check it out. I'll link to it above. The STI does not come with eyesight as an option. That said, I didn't want it to come with eyesight. This is a car that I want to be in control of all the time. So even though the CVT in my eyes wins because it is a safer car, that's something that really I didn't take into consideration because I didn't want it in the STI. I don't want any nanny features in this car. But there is one area where the STI is far better than the CVT in the safety category, and that's brakes. Because the STI comes with upgraded Brembo brakes, 6 pistons front, 2 piston rear. They're much better brakes. So if you know anything about the CVT, you know that the brakes suck. And you can make it far better by just putting performance brake pads. If we're talking stock, the STI, far better braking than the CVT. But still, that said, because of eyesight as a whole, the CVT wins this category. So let's talk about spirited driving around town. Which car has the upper edge here? So in this category, I'm gonna say that the STI has the edge, but only slightly. I know this is gonna be a little controversial, but you could have a lot of fun in the CVT. I mean, if you haven't tried it, you might not think you can. you really can. You can drive the car very aggressively. You can have fun around town. Let's not forget that the CVT has the FA20 engine, the twin scroll turbo, and it has less turbo lag than the STIs. Around town, it's a car that's gonna be quicker from light to light. But that said, the STI is a car that's stronger natively without having to get into turbo. So you have to, in order to feel any sort of performance out of the CVT, you have to be in boost. Whereas the STI, you could drive it pretty aggressively with only low boost, and it gets, you know, considerably more fun once you start getting up there. I'm not encouraging anybody to do street racing, but if you were at a stoplight and you had a CVT and an STI and they're both stock, there's a couple of things going on here. One, the CVT again has that twin scroll turbo and has that torque that hits far sooner than the STI. Two, the CVT can just be launched and requires no input from the driver other than just keeping the car straight. The STI, on the other hand, doesn't really start making serious power until it hits 4,000 RPMs. Not only that, but you have to keep track of actually, you know, obviously shifting the car properly. You have to shift perfectly to get every bit out of it. So even a slight lag on your part as a driver, you know, you're gonna leave a lot behind, a lot of power behind. So given how the STI really shines on the track and really shines on long straightaways because it doesn't really come alive until you hit that 4,000 RPMs, you're gonna have a lot of instances that CVT is gonna beat the STI. It's just gonna do it. And I know that sounds backwards, but it's just the reality of the game. That doesn't mean at all that the CVT is a more powerful car. It's just they're two different cars and they shine in different areas. This is the reason why the regular WRX is actually recommended for around town driving over the STI because of that. Because stop light to light, where you spend most of your time in a city, the WRX is a better car, you know, and by extension, the CVT. That said, the STI is a much more solid feeling car. When I'm driving the STI, I really have no reservations with, you know, downshifting and just hitting that gas hard ever. I feel like I can throw the car around without worrying about anything at all. When I had the CVT, I felt like I had to baby it sometimes. Not all the time, but, you know, really getting into extremely torquey scenarios. Like with a STI, you can get into some very high torque situations and I feel fine with it. And with a CVT, same thing. You could also get into high torque situations like downshifting when you're on manual mode, but I always felt a little uncomfortable doing it because I always felt in the back of my head, maybe I'm scoring the variators by doing this. It was something that was always in the back of my head. So I feel much more comfortable beating the car, the STI, than I ever did beating the CVT. And maybe it was all in my head, but that's just the fact of the matter. Because at the end of the day, if you destroy your clutch, well, I mean, it is what it is, and it's easy to replace, and you know, it's not the end of the world. But if you destroy a CVT, well, I mean, you better hope that you're still under warranty or you're gonna be paying out of pocket, and it's gonna be quite a bit of money. And the last category I want to cover in the video is ability to track the car. So obviously you can take both cars to the track. There's no denying that the STI is obviously the winner in this category, especially stock. The STI comes basically ready for you to go and enjoy and take to the track, whereas the CVT requires some modifications before you do so safely. For instance, you should definitely install a CVT cooler if you're going to be taking the CVT to the track, or you're going to be getting the transmission overheating light all the time, and it's just going to not be that much fun. Not only that, but you'll probably lessen the life of the CVT considerably if you're just taking it to the track, beating the crap out of the car without installing some supporting modifications to it, like the CVT cooler, better brakes, so on and so forth. The STI just comes ready. It has those Brembos that are great for stopping. It has a track performance tuned suspension, those low profile tires. It has that adjustable center differential that's going to allow you to really dial in what your car is doing in terms of torque. The track is really where the STI shines. The car doesn't really come alive until you hit that 3,000, 4,000 RPM range. Because in day-to-day driving, when you're taking off from a light or getting onto an on-ramp or something like that, oftentimes, you know, you have to let off the gas because you just run out of space. And in the track, obviously, that's not going to be much of a problem because that's what it's made for. Let's also not forget you still have the hydraulic steering, so it's going to give you better steering response when you're cornering. It's going to give you that really true connection between the driver and the road on the track versus the electronic version that's in the CVT that just kind of feels like it's just going through the paces. Because of all those things, the STI is by far the winner when it comes to taking the car to the track versus the CVT. Not to say you can't do it with a CVT. So that's gonna be it for this video. I needed to get out of the house and do something other than edit sound videos, which is what I've been doing. And also I wanted to take the car for a good ride after installing the air oil separator, which I installed a couple of days ago. Let me know in the comments section if you feel differently about any of these things, or if you think I missed the mark about something. I may have, I don't know. This is all very subjective, but having owned both cars, I've enjoyed both, and I think they both have their place, but they're very different cars. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next video. Take care.